Do not have Greg Hanna with us today, but we will ask that question. And my guest today, when you think about the whole OJ trial, everyone that was involved, OJ innocent and or guilty. We all know what happened. Then later, the truth came out in so many ways. My guest today knows so much about it. The author of Stalked. It could have been me. Keith Zalontsovich, I'll fix that. Keith, thanks for stopping by. And Keith, I'm telling you, here's my first question. When you met Nicole Brown, how did you meet her? And did you know her background when you first met her?
Initially, I did not. I was skiing in Aspen, Colorado. I had 2 restaurants there and 3 in Los Angeles under the Mezzaluna name. So many people became familiar with it later. But I was skiing one afternoon in January of '92, and I looked across the ski deck at the end of the day, and I saw what I thought was the most beautiful woman in the world. Had no idea who she was, where she came from, what her story was. I didn't care. She had this aura about her, and I made my mind up at that moment I was going to approach her and meet her somehow, some way. So sort of wedged myself over near her table. She was with a couple of girlfriends of hers, and I eavesdropped on their conversation until I felt the time was right. And the name Mezzaluna came out of one of their mouths, and I thought that was my in. So I interjected myself. She looked at me like, well, you're pretty brazen, sort of butting in our conversation, but we got a chuckle out of it. We started talking about Mezzaluna a bit. She told me almost instantly, and I remember this vividly, that she had come to Aspen to escape her abusive husband from Los Angeles. She didn't say who he was. I didn't ask. I didn't care at that particular moment. So, but I was aware that she was separated because that's what she said. So I invited her at that point to come into dinner at Mezzaluna that night because I knew I wanted to spend more time with her and get to know her a little better, which she did. She brought her kids in. She told me she had her kids with her and her girlfriends. They had a great dinner. And at the end of dinner, she approached me at the bar because I was working the restaurant like I do, and said, "You want to go out for a drink afterwards?" And I thought, man, fantastic. Give me a chance to spend more time with this lovely woman, get to know her a little better. Still didn't have a clue as to what her background or story was. So we went out to a local club.
I was going to ask a question right off the bat. So she didn't tell you. You know how in these dating apps now, Keith, where they don't tell you the whole story and certain things and the different stories. So when you first met her and then you invited her to come back out to the restaurant, you didn't have much conversation back and forth between that time. It sounds
No,
like.
she went back to her condo with her friends where she was staying. I went to work. I had invited them in for dinner. I assured them they would have a table waiting because what prompted them to say the word Mezzaluna that gave me the in was they were basically complaining to each other. They had a bad experience the night before in my restaurant. My one night off that I took that month, and it happened to be the night they were in. And they were sort of asked to get up from their table after dinner because we have a 3-hour wait in there. And they felt that was a little aggressive. So I assured them I'd have a table waiting for them. And I did. So I didn't ask many more questions. They went back to their condo. They came in for dinner. Like I said, she asked me if I wanted to go out after. We did. So that's where I started to find out a little bit. She was telling me when we were at the club that she had come there to get away from her husband. She was just separated. They had just separated. She had just moved into her own residence and was filing for divorce. I didn't think much of it. Still at that point, you got to remember my restaurants were very celebrity driven, so celebrities to me were a dime a dozen at that point. I didn't know I knew who OJ was, but he wasn't on my radar. It was later that evening when she got up to dance with one of her girlfriends, and I stayed at the table that one of my friends came up and leaned over and said, "Dude, that's OJ's wife." And I went, okay, well, that makes sense now. So she came back to the table after dancing, and I confronted her with that, kind of jokingly. And she was, "Well, now the cat's out of the bag." So that was when I found out who it was. We had one great, fantastic night together. I write about it in the book. And we made an agreement that when I got to LA in about a month and a half, as I normally would for work reasons, that we would kind of pick up where this night was taking us and go from there. So we kept in touch every day over the phone for the next 6 weeks or so until I got to Los Angeles, where I immediately went to her house. The first night I was in town to see her. I was so excited. And then it all began from there. The whole OJ situation started
No,
from.
no, exactly. So so you pretty much, I mean, I don't know how old you were at that point, Keith, if you mind saying, how old were you when you were dating her?
31.
31. So looking back at the 31-year-old, if somebody like, let's just say, I don't know your relationships now, and you've met another woman and they said, I just got out of an abusive relationship and I'm really scared of him. Would you even consider now dating someone like that?
Well, I would consider helping that person get out of that relationship, because that's part of the reason I wrote this book, is I wanted women to understand the signs and what they see. But it certainly was a traumatic experience, as I described very well. But it was so unique because I don't think there's a lot of situations like OJ. There's a lot of abusive relationships out there, I'm sure, but not many with the specter, of OJ.
Exactly. So even if, let's just say it was a mafioso or something, I mean, just think about OJ and how dangerous he was, right? And that's why I'm glad you're writing this book to talk about those specific things. But just imagine you meet an attractive woman and that woman says, "By the way, I just got out of I have an abusive boyfriend, just broke up. He's, beat me several times, threatened my life." This is for guys too. If a guy is meeting a woman like that and knows there's somebody else out there like that, it's good you say, Keith, you want to help them out of the relationship, but you're going to think second chances of really trying to have a relationship with that person.
You are correct, because I've lived it now, so I understand the danger that's involved and the risk that you take, because that jealous ex most likely is not going to forget, and is going to go out of his way to either just make that relationship miserable or do the ultimate like OJ did.
And I know about abusive exes, by the way. I see, look at me. I'm sure I'll get in trouble for that comment. And I have some people tuning in now because they were so intrigued by this story. So I had to throw that one out there. But so basically, you're hitting it off, you come back, and you have no idea what kind of fire you're putting yourself into.
Not initially. The first night when I arrived in California, I went to see her at her house. We were hanging out in the backyard. We actually got in the jacuzzi. We were sort of relaxing. She was telling me a little bit about how things were going, that the divorce papers had been filed, that things were moving forward, that she was so happy to get out of the relationship. It was abusive. She hadn't told me the full background of it yet, but she was starting to open up. And we noticed that evening that all of a sudden the phone started ringing incessantly. So we kind of felt like we were being watched. We had an eerie feeling sitting in the backyard. It was the next night when it began. So my second night in town, I invited her and her girlfriends down to Mezzaluna Beverly Hills, one of my two Mezzalunas in Los Angeles. We had a big thing on Tuesday nights, a celebrity kind of packed night. And she had heard about it, her girlfriends and her. So I invited them down, told them I'd have a table for them, which they showed up. It was a great chance for me to spend time with her. But as soon as they showed up shortly after, I'm hanging out with them, and bam, up pulls OJ's car to the front door. I checked later with my employees if they had ever seen OJ in the restaurant before, or if he had ever shown up, especially for a Tuesday night. And they all agreed no. So he knew we were there. He knew where to find us. He comes screaming up in the Bentley to the front door valet, jumps out of the car, comes in the restaurant, and goes directly to our table, slams his hands down, looks me right in the eyes, and says, "I'm OJ Simpson, and she's still my wife." So that was my first face to face with OJ, my second night in town. Nicole's holding my hand, trembling like a leaf next to me. I could feel the tension. And obviously, here's this monster standing above me. I'm 5 foot nothing, 145 pounds back then. I wish I still was. But and I got this guy over top of me, knowing that it's his ex-wife sitting next to me and that there's a history of violence there. So it started immediately, and then it progressed from there.
So why didn't you just say, okay, I'm done? Owning a restaurant in Beverly Hills, you're going to meet a lot of women. Keith,
And
come
I
on
did.
now. Yeah, I mean, and high-powered women potentially too, because of Beverly Hills, right? What made you say, I'm going to continue this relationship? Now, looking
She
back.
she was unlike, and I mentioned some names in my book of other high-powered women that I had relationships with prior to Nicole. She was different. There was something about her that I wouldn't have walked away from. She was just amazing. And I knew that early on. I mean, when you have that energy, that dynamic with someone, I think almost right off the bat. And I felt that. And it almost didn't matter to me. And as things got worse and the stalking became more prevalent and the threats became, right there in our face. I mean, some of the details, they've been widely reported through my grand jury testimony for the trial. But, he watched us making love through the window of her house. And he kicked in the door the next day and got in our face. So there were multiple events that any reasonable person would have probably turned and ran. I didn't. I stood
Wow.
there, and I wanted to be her protector. And I only wish I could have done more.
So why didn't your story, and this, I'm jumping to the most important things I want to hear. Why didn't your story get out? Like, I don't know your name as well. And I watched the trial a ton, and because they really only placed it on, the loss again of Ron Goldman as well in this whole process, that they really didn't mention you a lot in the news. Did you try to keep it hidden? Did
I
you? Yeah.
I definitely did. I was told, the week of the murders and everything that transpired was the most unreal thing you can imagine. I go from finding out the woman I still loved, even though I was in Atlanta and hadn't spoken to her for 6 months or so because of OJ. He refused to let us communicate anymore based on that 911 call everyone's heard from October of 93, where he's kicking in the door of her house and screaming my name. Um, so not knowing what's going on. So I wake up to the woman I love is murdered. I fly out immediately. I'm a pallbearer at her funeral 3 days later, where I'm holding her casket. That's the first time I'd seen her since we were forbidden to speak. And I'm standing next to the man who murdered her. He didn't get arrested until the next day. The Bronco chase was the day after the funeral. So I went from finding out she's murdered to being a pallbearer at her funeral to standing next to OJ for the 8 hours that it took to go through the mass and the burial and everything involved. And then the next day with the Bronco chase, which I have a story about that as well. And then 2 days later, I'm thrown up before the grand jury with very little prep by the prosecution. And I'm told that whatever I say behind those doors will never be known by the public. It's a sealed grand jury. No one's going to know who you are. So feel safe in spilling your beans or your guts, so to speak. So I did. I went home to Florida under subpoena now for the trial that would be upcoming. 2 or 3 days later, they released the testimony for the grand jury. Someone disbanded it, some judge somewhere. And now my name was public. And I went from being anonymous to everyone knowing who I was. And then it became a mission by the media. We got to get this guy. This is the boyfriend. This is the stalking. This is the violence. This is all the stuff we haven't heard. We need to find this guy. So my life went from reasonably tame to out of control. I'm offered $1 million in cash by numerous publications, every media outlet, Barbara Walters, Connie Chung, 60 Minutes, The Inquirer, Current Affair, you name it, was on top of me day, night. I'm hiding out in Florida. I'm sneaking out of my house in the trunk of a car so I could go eat dinner, not have cameras in my face. So during that period of time, my name was all over the place, but I refused every interview offer and every monetary compensation. Didn't want to mess with my testimony. I knew I was under subpoena and didn't want to damage that credibility. And I had no desire to speak about things that were personal between Nick and myself. So I sat back, I waited. I was told by the prosecution I was going to be the first witness in the trial. And I'm getting to your question right now. They flew me out to be the first witness. They put Denise on instead, Nick's sister. She was also a domestic violence evidence witness. They used her for about 3 days. It drug on longer than they thought. And they looked at me and said, we got a lot out of Denise we weren't really planning to. We're going to save you. You're going to be the last witness in the trial. We're going to open with domestic violence and we're going to close with domestic violence. And if they get bored in the middle with the DNA and the blood evidence, then we're going to bring them back with your domestic violence at the end. And that's going to be the emotional part. Well, we all know what happened in the meantime with Furman and, the racial component and jurors getting booted off and them sort of tailoring that jury to what they wanted, the defense, that by the time they got to me, I was told what you say isn't going to matter anymore. They were basically on their heels at this point. So the prosecution didn't use me. Then I became subpoenaed by the defense. I was the only witness, as far as I understand, that was subpoenaed by both sides. Now, the defense was never going to call me because I would have blown up in their face. And I think they know that. But they wanted to put out there in the court of public opinion, oh, well, this guy's under subpoena because, I mean, if OJ watched him having sex with his wife through the window of the house and didn't kill him, why would he kill this poor guy, Ron Goldman? And if OJ walked up to Keith and shook his hand,
right,
you know, why would he kill Ron Goldman?
right.
So that was their sort of ploy on the media, but it didn't hold any water, and they ultimately didn't use me either. So I went from being the main witness to not being used in the trial in principle. So
Because we have a short interview, not a long one, Keith. I'm going to go with this big number one question. Were you fearful for your life once OJ got out?
100%. That's why the book was written after he died. I mean, I considered writing the story while the trial was going on, not during the trial, but after he was found guilty. I was going to let people know the real story about things that he had put us through. And then he's found not guilty, and of course, I was concerned for the better part of my life, except for those few years he was locked up in Vegas. And I didn't even consider writing this book until he passed away 2 years ago.
Wow. And picking to do it now, good timing in so many ways. But I love the fact that you're trying to help so that the domestic violence really has to be spoken out more. That when people are going through these things and they feel they're stuck, that there is hope. And Keith, that's the goal, I think, what you want for this book. Your story to be told, but also that.
Absolutely. And I hope people realize, women who might be in these situations, that thanks to Nicole, there's more of an outreach system out there. There's more outlets for them to reach out to. A lot of domestic violence was brought to light because of Nicole and Ron's murders. So there are ways for you to get a hold of help and support systems out there. So if you're in one of those situations and you recognize these signs, maybe from some of the things I write about in the book and some of the things you might recognize from what Nick and I went through, take the time to reach out and get yourself out of that situation.
Did you know Ron Goldman, Keith?
I did not. I had left Mezzaluna Restaurant, my company, several months before the murders. I had gone to Atlanta, where I was when she was murdered, to scout out a new location for something I was doing on my own. And I knew everybody else at that Mezzaluna. I had hired the rest of the staff and trained them, and all the managers were friends of mine. But Ron was brought on after I had left. So personally, I did not know him, but I take the time in my book to thank him from the bottom of my heart for trying to stick up for Nicole and defend her the best he could and paying the ultimate price with his life.
Do you feel that anyone from your restaurant tried to warn Ron before he tried to get involved? If he was, that again, the story is not there, right? That they were
Right.
involved or not.
I don't believe, from all of my understandings and talking to people on the inside, that they were involved in any way, shape, and form. I think Ron simply was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Everyone knew that Nick and I had a past, and that we had been together and we were still incredibly great friends. So they knew that she was a friend of the restaurant and she was a regular, obviously. And so they knew she lived behind Mezzaluna. She was close by. So
Mhm.
everybody kind of knew her story. So I think, in my honest opinion, that Ron was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I don't doubt for 1 minute that OJ thought it was me coming through the gate that night. He knew she had dinner at my restaurant. He didn't know I was out of town. He didn't know where I was at. And he always associated me with Mezzaluna. And he never forgot me. I mean, you hear those 911 tapes in October of 93. That was a year after OJ had ever seen me or heard my voice, when he went crazy and kicked in
Right.
that back door. So I think as Ron came through the gate, I think he was in the process of doing what he was doing to Nick anyway. And I think Ron paid that ultimate price. I'm not sure of that, but that's why the book is titled what it is. I mean, it's called Stalked. It could have been me for a reason.
What about your mental health? How did you go through, especially the rest of your life, looking over your shoulder?
Well, I tried to live my life the best I could. I didn't hide. I didn't run. I didn't cower. I was very public. I was out there. I had a bar in New York City for 20 years. As far as emotionally, I never really could go that next level in an attachment. I had some wonderful girlfriends over the years that I enjoyed all the time we spent together, but I could never get to that level of marriage or raising a family. So I've remained single and childless to this day, pushing 65 years old.
Oh, you don't look 65, by the way. So
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no, but I mean, so that's got to be rough. But you got to say, I mean, to always having relationships, but feeling that you're ever fearful when somebody comes violent to you, comes up at you and stuff after the experiences with OJ.
Well, I try to steer clear of any situations like that, obviously. But in New York City, walking home from a bar at 4 o'clock in the morning, which was my normal routine for 20 years, it crossed my mind a lot of times. Down those side streets with those dark stoops and kind of stairwells, somebody could jump out. I didn't know if it was going to be him or somebody he paid, but he mentioned me all the time after the acquittal. I mean, he talked about me in interviews. He wrote about me in that ridiculous book he wrote, If I Did It. He mentions me by name numerous times. So he didn't just forget me. I mean, so that tells you a little bit more about the person himself. He wasn't a innocent man looking for the people who killed his ex-wife. He was an angry ex-husband who got away with murder and still was pissed off at the guy he always considered the one who stood up to him, which I
You,
did.
you talked about the fear of the story and getting into the wrong hands. We talked about that in the green room. Why are there still people that love OJ after it finally came out? He did do it.
I can't answer that. I just know there's a segment of society out there. I get trolled on the internet on occasion by people who are just OJ fans. They always will be, and they discount evidence, or maybe they just don't care that he did it. That's not for me to argue that point. But my fear of releasing the book in audio was that someone would take it and someone would use it, to damage me. But Nick always told me there's two sides to OJ, the public side that everyone sees and the private side that no one sees, and don't ever be left alone with that one. So these people don't know that side of OJ. They see the guy in Naked Gun, they see the guy running in a Buffalo Bills helmet, and that's what they base their opinion on. And I feel sorry for those people, but I can't live my life worrying about them.
Right. So what are you doing now, Keith?
I'm retired for the most part, doing a little traveling. I'm in the South Florida area. I try to stay in the sun. I'm a boater. I'm a licensed boat captain. So I had a charter company in Key West for years. And I try to stay on the water and play a little golf when I can.
So retired. So no entrepreneurship anymore for you. You're done.
Yeah, I'm done with the restaurant game. It's a tough lifestyle, the bars and restaurants, and I did my 35, 40 years in that business. Oddly enough, I write about this in the book. My last venture was going to be a restaurant in North Carolina that I was considering doing last year. I went up to North Carolina to sort of write the book, be away from things a little bit. And I looked around for a location up there. I was going to call it Nick's. Nick was my name for her. I never called her Nicole. I always called her Nick. And I was this close to opening another one, and I just said to myself, at this stage of life, I don't think I want to. I don't think I have it in me. But if I ever do, it's going to be dedicated to her.
All right. Where's the best place people can pick up your book and learn about you? Where can they go?
Amazon. You can go directly on Amazon and type in "stalked." It could have been me. You can type in my name; it'll come up. Or I do have a dedicated website for the book. I was unable to get the word stalked. It was taken already. So my website is ojstalkedme.com,
All
all one
right.
word. So if you type ojstalkedme.com, it takes you to the website. There's links to buy the book on there as well. And it tells you a little bit about myself in the book as well.
All right. So last question is from my co-host who asked this question to all these celebrities, Keith. And this is a really good question. So be ready for this one.
Okay.
So Keith, what is the most important thing in life you've ever learned? Ever. So
Um, Loyalty, truth, honesty, and love. You know, I can't change what happened with Nick and and I couldn't change the outcome of how things were, but I will never forget that love that we had and that I had for her, because that's what got me on through the next 30 years, remembering the good times and the feelings that we had for each other. So.
all right. Thanks again, Keith. All right. That was a special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and celebrity interviews live from the Grotto of Greg Hanna. Take care.